Hey guys, it's Dion. I hope everyone's doing well. I'm doing well down here. Looking forward to this week's devotionals from everyone and looking forward to seeing everybody again on Friday night. I want to talk to you today about the desires of your heart. And I want to use the story of Zacchaeus to kind of illustrate some of the points, um, and especially the main point that sometimes the desires of our heart are not necessarily in line with God's desires, but once we have an encounter with God, those desires are changed and changed in a way that reflect his desires. But anyway, before we get into the story of Zacchaeus, I want to talk a little bit about Zacchaeus and give a little bit of the bio about Zacchaeus. Now, the word gives us two important details about Zacchaeus. The first being that Zacchaeus is a tax collector in a time where tax collectors are not looked upon fondly. Secondly, Zacchaeus is not very big. He's short. He's short in stature. And as we go along with the story, those are two things that I think are important for a number of different reasons. But we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But back to the story. As Jesus is passing through Jericho, um, there's I would assume that it's almost like a parade going through town, and people want to know more about Jesus and want to see Jesus, want to touch Jesus, and really want to become more familiar with Jesus. And Zacchaeus is no different. Once he sees Jesus approaching, he climbs up a tree because he can't see over the taller people in front of him. So he climbs up in a tree to kind of see Jesus, to lay eyes on Jesus. And Jesus notices Zacchaeus up in the tree, and he tells him to come on down. And I think it's worth noting that in the verses it mentions that Zacchaeus joyfully came down, cheerfully came down. He wanted to come down and meet Jesus. I would assume that he probably almost fell out of the tree he was trying to get down so quickly to come meet and greet and speak with Jesus. So Zacchaeus comes down and they're talking and as Zacchaeus is on his way to meet and greet Jesus, there's some rumblings in the crowd and those rumblings are because Zacchaeus is a tax collector and why would Jesus choose a tax collector to talk to? I mean, they're the lowest of the low, and blah blah blah, and which brings about another point where that we won't get in today, but sometimes it's we who call ourselves Christians who have the biggest problem with who God is choosing to use. But that's a devotional maybe for another day. But Zacchaeus comes down and Jesus is talking to Zacchaeus and just this small interaction with Jesus prompts Zacchaeus to give his wealth to the poor and to proclaim that anybody that I've cheated, I'll return your money and then some. And so it's easy on the surface to see how just this small encounter with Jesus has changed Zacchaeus. But I want to dig into it a little bit deeper in terms of Zacchaeus and his desire. I mentioned earlier that Zacchaeus, that the word gives us two important details about Zacchaeus. One is that he's a tax collector, and two is that he's short. Now, it's the second of those two that I want to dig into a little bit right now. I would imagine that Zacchaeus, and this is breaking news, so hold on to your chairs. Zacchaeus probably was short his entire life. Yeah, short his entire life. And I don't know about you guys, but on every playground that I've ever been on, the short guy kind of gets the raw end of the stick. They're usually last. They're picked last for sports. Um, they don't have very much luck with the ladies because they a lot of women don't want to date or to be associated with a guy that's smaller than they are. So you think about that. He's short and he's been teased a lot, and he's probably not been made to feel welcome wherever he is. You couple that with the fact that he is greedy because he's a tax collector, and tax collectors during that time were considered greedy and immoral. So it's this short guy who doesn't have very many friends becomes a tax collector. Now I think, in my mind, he became a tax collector because he was short. See, the way my mind works is that Zacchaeus didn't have very many friends. So the desires of his heart were security and to feel significant and to feel important. And I don't know very many people who, when they look for significance and look for importance, don't associate that at some point in some way, shape, or form with money. Because Zacchaeus was small and in his mind insignificant. I'm going to choose a profession where I have power, I'm significant, and you have to pay attention to me. Well, you have to pay attention if a tax collector comes to your house. You can't avoid it. It's not like times today where you can hide in another room and ignore phone calls and turn off all the lights to make people think you're not home. It wasn't that kind of time. So Zacchaeus had access to you. You had to respect him. You had to acknowledge him. And so Zacchaeus' desires were based in my, if and I could be completely wrong, but in my heart I feel like Zacchaeus' desires were based on a need to feel important and a need to feel significant. And those desires of greed, wealth, and power weren't aligned with God's desires. So it was no accident when Jesus came through Jericho, he sought out Zacchaeus. Your priorities are not aligned with my priorities, Zacchaeus. Come on down from that tree. We need to talk. We need to talk. And just because of who God is and just the gloriousness of Jesus, this one small encounter with Zacchaeus changes it. It changes the desires of his heart. The funny thing about desires are that whatever we desire usually leads us to an action, and that action usually leads us to our circumstances. Zacchaeus' desire was to be known, to be respected, to be acknowledged. That action led to him becoming a tax collector. The fact that he was a tax collector led to his circumstance being, while having money and being wealthy, probably not the kind of peace and satisfaction that he wanted to have. Now, just one encounter from Jesus changed his desire. Now, he wanted to give to the poor, and because he gave to the poor, that action changed his circumstances. Now people all of a sudden wanted to be around him, and the desire that he thought he wanted, the one for significance, the one to be acknowledged, the one for power, the one for wealth, wasn't aligned with God and really wasn't the desires of his heart. The desires of his heart were to be accepted. And he only got that desire. He only achieved that desire. That desire, that thirst was only quenched once he had an encounter with God. See, I apply that to my life. There have been so many times when I've thought I've wanted something, and I've worked to achieve that. You know, I for instance, it's this really cool pair of shoes. I worked overtime because my desire was the shoes. My action was that I worked harder. The circumstance was that I got the shoe, but I was so worried about it getting dirty, so worried about somebody stepping on it, so worried about it being stolen, that it made my circumstance miserable. The desire that I thought I wanted wasn't the one that I really needed, wasn't the one that aligned with God. Now, when God gives you a desire, when he places a desire in your heart, when he changes you, then your actions reflect that. Your actions reflect good. It reflects something holy. It reflects something worthwhile. And then your circumstance becomes better. Guys, that's all that I have for you today. I hope that this, on some level, is helpful. It certainly ministers to me a great deal, and really teaches me a lesson that I feel like is important in every walk of life. We know that the scripture says that if we believe in God, He will give us the desires of our heart. But guys, those desires have to be aligned with God's desires. It has to be aligned with God's will. Anyway, I'm not as long-winded today, but I hope that gives something to someone, and I love you all. I can't wait to see you. Bye.